Välkommen till Aktiespararna och Stora Aktiedagen här i Stockholm. Vi kommer snart att få lyssna till en presentation av bolaget Initiator Pharma och det är Claus Olesen, vd för bolaget, som kommer att göra den presentationen för oss. Efteråt så kommer jag, Peter Malmström, att diskutera lite grann med Claus och ställa honom en del frågor. Och det går även bra för er som lyssnar på presentationen att göra detsamma, och hur ni gör det framgår av skärmen framför er. This presentation will be given in English, so I welcome you, Claus. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, I'll speak in English because then my Swedish is not so good, even though I've been practicing for some years by now. So Initiator Pharma is a company that actually have a clear vision. We want to pioneer innovative drugs that targets critical unmet medical needs by modulation of the peripheral and the central nervous system. And I'll show you the pipeline that we're working with multiple drug candidates, also in multiple indications. So as a company, we are a Danish company. However, we are listed here in Stockholm on the First North Stock Exchange. We have the company was founded back in 2017, and we have financing in place into 2025. So besides that, we have 4,000 shareholders, and some of our cornerstone investors are Link, that we have had a long-standing relationship with, that sits on about 20% of the shares in the company, and we also have Drigo supporting us in this. But of course, none of our development and all the money we have spent so far would have been possible without the retail investors that have supported us in this clear vision of developing and pioneering new drugs. On the board and the management side, we have a number of people, and I'd just like to highlight one from each group. The most recent addition to the board is Gunilla Ekström, who has a background from AstraZeneca, who has actually been working with neuroscience development on neuroscience compounds for multiple years. She has been a very support and very strengthening of the board in Initiator Pharma, bringing on a lot of her, big pharma expertise into looking into the setting of neuroscience. From the management, I would like to highlight Mikael Thompson, who's a very experienced clinical developer. He's the person who's been in charge of all our clinical trials. And this is no little task. It's really important to make sure you do the trials right, and we get really positive feedback on that we have conducted very nice trials. We often hear about trials that have mishaps and they don't follow exactly the protocols and so on. And this is the responsibility for the CDO, the development officer, to follow this. Michael is doing this with a background from Novo Nordisk, where he has more than 25 years of being head of global clinical pharmacology, been running multiple phase 1 and phase 2 studies. So a really experienced person here running this for us. So the pipeline that we are working with all consists of what we call Monamine reuptake transporters. So we are actually having molecules that inhibits a protein that functions as a pump, you could say. The transporters that we are working with are monoamines, and that relates to serotonin, to dopamine, and norepinephrine. So you can say we have different compounds with different profiles. So even though they bind to the similar kind of transporters, they have a profile that gives us a very different profile of which monoamines we increase in the brain. Pudafensine, IP2018, has most dopaminergic effects. That we are advancing in 3 clinical programs, or 2 clinical programs and 1 preclinical. We have shown in a phase 2b study, we have shown that we have a positive efficacy data. And also we have also shown that in a phase 1c in a healthy volunteer pain challenge study that pudafensine has pain relief effects here. Most recently we have shown in preclinical models that the compound pudafensine also changes behavior in female rats and mice on sexual dysfunctions. In addition to that, we have IP2018 that is developed for Psychogenic ED, which we have demonstrated proof of concept. Data came out this summer. We're in a phase 2A study with 24 patients. Came out positive, reaching primary endpoints. Also, IP2018 has shown in preclinical models that it will work in female sexual dysfunction. In addition to that, we have 2 preclinical compounds, 2016 and 2017, that we are still exploring what to use for, but they have a profile that is still yet different from the others, even though you can say that the order of what we have written here, dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine, there is a difference in the profiles of them. So why is modulation of monoamine relevant for patients, and also why is it more relevant for us to go in and modulate these molecules? Well, we have in the brain, we have the monogenic system. So it's a system in the brain that is actually controlling a lot of physiological behaviors. It's mood, it's some of the locomotor functions, it's arousal, specific types of memory, and it's all driven by these neurotransmitters called monamines, which are serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. This is a validated technology. We've been using these molecules that modulate these levels of monamines for multiple years in the clinic. We use them for treatment of Parkinson, we used it for pain indications, but also very much for treatment of depression. And depression is actually a really good indication to look at, because here we increase the levels of serotonin, but we often do it too much, and about 70 to 80% of the patients taking an antidepressive develop a sexual dysfunction over time. So even though you can say that it helps with one disease, it actually brings on a lot of side effects. And side effects has been the biggest challenge with most of these drugs modulating the monamine system. They have too many side effects. They can have cardiovascular effects. They can have direct, what we call protein-to-protein interactions, so they increase levels of other drugs. They can also be abuse, and they can also, in some of them, actually suicidal thoughts and so on. So it's really important to do it in a safe way. What we are advancing here, we are advancing a generation of safe and tolerable molecules that inhibits the transporters, the reuptake transporters of the monamines. So what our primary indications we are looking for is erectile dysfunction, and it's estimated that more than 400 million men will suffer from this by 2025. We of course know, and I'll show you on the next slide, that there's many treatments out there for these patients. But we are not going to compete with any of those. We are going to take the patients that do not respond to the current therapies out there, or who cannot tolerate it, because maybe they take other drugs that actually co-interact with taking the marketed drugs for erectile dysfunction. So what happens today? You go to the doctor if you suffer from ED. They normally prescribe you a PD-5 inhibitor, Viagra, Cialis, or Levitra. All the compounds have different names, but they work with the same mechanism of action. They can prolong an erection. If they work, everything is good, and you follow up with the doctor. In many cases, it's not enough. So here we try to change the pill, but as I just said, it's the same mechanism of action. Or we're trying to combine them, or we give a higher dose. And you can see here about 35% of all ED patients do not respond to the current therapies there. If you look at people with diabetes, we actually increase the non-responder rate to 50%. So what do we do with these patients we bring in? We give them other medications. We try to change their lifestyle. We try to educate them on how to use the products. And if it doesn't work, the only way you can do it today is using 2 injectable products based on alpostadil. And these products are either with a syringe or a small capsule in the urine tract, and you get an erection that is completely independent of stimulation. So there's no stimulation involved here. And this is not something that the patients or their partners prefer. So there is a significant unmet medical need in this space for these non-responders to the current therapy. Why develop 2 drugs? I mentioned pudafensine and IP2018. We do that because there's 2 different kinds of ED. You can say they are not completely separated, they are in a continuum, so you see an overlap between the 2 indications. And you can say the organic, that's what happened to us men when we turn 40 and older. We get physical impaired to deliver sufficient blood to the penile tissue. This is caused by age, lifestyle, obesity, too much alcohol, smoking, and so on. Whereas we look at the psychogenic, which we refer to as people with low mood, depression, or performance anxiety, or people that are taking these antidepressives that I mentioned in the beginning. So therefore, we need to have 2 drugs that actually treats the underlying condition. In organic erectile dysfunction, we focus on strengthening the natural erection response with dopamine, and in the psychogenic group, we actually also need to support the low mood or depression by increasing the serotonin levels. So you can say 1 indication, but actually 2 different modalities behind it. So what is happening here? We're looking at the way that the system works is that when we see something nice, we're being touched to remember something, we actually process it in the brain, and that leads to a massive release of dopamine in the PVN, the paraventricular nucleus, which is what we can refer to as the sex center in the brain. This upregulation of dopamine leads to a series of signaling cascades that ends up in producing more nitric oxide in the arteries running to the penile tissue. They dilate, means they open up, and more blood is flowing into the penis and we get the erection. So what is it we do? Well, I mentioned again, dopamine is the molecule that activates the erection response. So by inhibiting the reuptake of dopamine, we actually increase the signal. We increase when dopamine is released, it will be out in the synaptic cleft where it interacts with the receptors for a longer time, and thereby we amplify or strengthen the natural erection response. Both pudafensine and 2018 is doing that, and in addition, 2018 also increases the serotonin level, as we said, to treat the low mood, low depression. So we have real unique drugs here that is clearly differentiated to the PD5 inhibitors. A PD5 inhibitor can only prolong a natural occurring erection. It cannot initiate it the way we can. So I'm just showing you some of the clinical results we have done. So in IPED 2015 program with pudafensine in organic erectile dysfunction, we have just run a phase 2b study in 130 patients at 7 sites in the UK. And this is a proper study. It's placebo-controlled, blinded, and so on. So it's done up to Pharma specs, which I'll come back to. So the way we did this is a repeat dosing study. So they come into the clinic, and they actually get 4 dosings. And then they go home to their partner and have an intercourse. What we do in this study is actually we use the same endpoint that you will use in a later pivotal or registration trial for a product in erectile dysfunction, the IIEF scores. So this is a questionnaire where you assessed, did you actually get an erection? Could you sustain throughout the intercourse? But also asking to more soft values and so on. Did you get aroused? What's the overall satisfaction and so on? But these are the right endpoints in a later trial. Of course, we also look for safety and tolerability, as this is a phase 2 study. And what we saw in this study, we saw actually something really exciting. We actually reached the primary endpoint on the improvements related to the intercourse setting. So again, we both compared to the placebo and also to the baseline, we saw significant p-values here. We can also see in this study, we can also see that there was actually, and the other values that we had from the EIF score, we actually saw compared to the baseline, we saw statistically significant improvements on a multiple of these parameters. Again, supporting the use of this product for a later approval. What is also very important is that we saw that it was very safe and tolerable. Of course, a product like this, we cannot have any side effects. We need to have something that is safely administered. And we see that. And at the low dose, where we saw the best pharmacological effect of pudafensine, we see that the side effects are very mild and moderate and completely comparable to what we see in the placebo group. So very strong data. And right now we're doing the post-hoc analysis of these data, looking at all the individual patients and how they respond. In the other program, the 2018 in Psychogenic ED, we came up with results during the summer, where we actually did in a little bit of similar study, but still, you can say, different in the way that this is not an intercourse study. This is a study where we mount what's called a Regiscan apparatus to the penis of the patients, and then we show them an erotic movie after they've been dosed either with active or placebo, and then we measure the erection. So this is a you could say artificial way of measuring whether the tablet works. The patients included here are also different, because now we're not just talking about people that has erectile dysfunction. We're also talking about patients that have low mood or mild depressions. And we brought them in, and then they actually, in this study, they get high and low dose of the compound and a placebo. So it's a 3-way crossover, double-blinded randomized study. So nobody knows what they get at what time. And again, here in this study, we actually saw that we reached at the high dose of IP 2018, we actually saw we reached 2 of the primary endpoints. And again, this was tumescence and also the duration of rigidity. And you can say these are 2 key parameters for actually completing or starting and completing an intercourse. Again, here with 2018, we again see that the drug is very safe to administrate. We only saw mild effects, side effects, and everything that normally you will see either with placebo or with drugs in a clinic like this. It is in a clinic. You are in a small room. You see a video, erotic movie. So there is, of course, a little bit of anxiety in such a study. And as I showed you one of the very first slides, anxiety is not good for erection. So we are super happy about the results in this study. Again, demonstrating that we actually have 2 different molecules that actually will support the development of novel ED treatments. At the last couple of minutes, I will just talk briefly about something new that we have added to the repertoire. Because since the very first day we presented the idea of providing relief for sexual dysfunction for men, we have been asked about, what about the women? And you could say that it's really easy to see on a male rat or mice whether it's erect or not. It's much more complicated and much more fine, delicate when we coming to women. There's a lot more hormonal effects as well. So we've been taking some time to consider how to do this best. And what we have actually shown now, as I said, we actually shows that both IP 2018 and pudafensine has positive effects, both on behavior but also on physiological changes in these mice and rats that we have tested. But looking at FSD, or female sexual dysfunction, of course this is a multiple faceted disease. And it is an approved disease. It is registered in the textbooks. It is actually something that also the FDA has asked, could somebody please help us solving this problem? You can say it consists of multiple parameters. It could be orgasmic dysfunctions, it can be pain, it could also be arousal dysfunctions. But the center of all this is actually what we call the desire. Do you want to have an intercourse? And this is something that is really important. It's probably driving a lot of the other factors. So that's why we're actually looking at what we call the HSDD, so hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which we think is the key driver in this. And we have discussed this with many KOLs, and they agree. So how common is this? Well, one thing is to have a sexual dysfunction, but you also need to be distressed about it. That actually 1 out of 10 women is suffering from this. So this is a huge market. I think that most of us, we've probably seen commercials for Viagra and so on television. I will bet you never seen anyone talking about this. And it's just as a big problem, if not even bigger. So looking into the women, you can say that in the postmenopausal women, there is nothing approved. So this is an open market to go into. In the premenopausal women, there's 2 products approved. One is an injectable, and the other one is a compound you have to take every day. And we have learned from the KOLs that people, they do not want to use injectables. They want to have an on-demand dosing tablet, and it wants to be non-hormonal. But I'll come back to that. So briefly on the biology, I don't really expect you to remember this, but you can say the underlying biology behind desire and so on in females are exactly the same as we see in the males. So again, the neurotransmitters of monamines, the dopamine plays a key role here on top of many of the hormones. So again, we are strengthening the underlying biology by increasing the dopamine levels with our compounds. So you can say, on looking at this, what is it actually we have that we think that pudafensine is such a good drug candidate? Well, we have shown in preclinical models that actually we have an effect. We increase the blood flow in the genitals, we change the behavior of the animals and so on. We also know that it's a very safe compound. We actually dosed this compound now to more than 200 men, so we know it's safe. And that is a key finding we need to have when we develop something for women. It's non-hormonal and it's on demand, the results that we have. So we actually think that this is really a good thing to look into the future. Maybe pudafensine is not only for men, but it's actually a sexual dysfunction drug as a whole. Just the last slide here before the end, or the second last slide, saying what is it we are doing with all the data we have now. Of course, business development is running at full speed. We just came back from Europe presenting our data. We were at Jefferies healthcare conference the week after, and we have multiple things lined up. And you can say overall we get very positive feedback. They like the trials we run, they like the power of the trials, they like the way we conducted them. And of course, they like to see that we show efficacy on clinically relevant settings, using the right endpoints for the future approval of such a drug. So why should you invest in Initiator Pharma? I think that we have shown that we have a very de-risked profile with the compounds we are advancing. We have now shown again that we actually have efficacy in the clinical trials. So super excited here. We also see that, can say that there's I'll just click like this, see that we actually have a commercial attractive markets. There's many patients out there. There's no treatments available for these patients, so there's something new. We are financed well in beyond 24, so we don't need to go and raise money. So we have time to conduct the business development on the assets we have. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claus. Thank you. one of many interesting things that you mention here is, of course, financing. I mean, we hear that lots of companies, they have a difficulty in finding the resources that they're looking for, but that is nothing that one should be worried about for the upcoming 12 months, as I've understood it. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can say financing is always something to worry about, because you're gonna make
but
sure that you don't overspend.
In the short run, let's say.
I think that you can look at what we have done. We have with the last round that we raised, we did, where we actually had Rodrigo and Link step up in ownership, and now Link has about 20% of the shares. We actually, we put down the basis for being in the position we are now.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to raise money on the back of the data in a market that we didn't know. So we raised money early on to be diligent, so we knew that we had time on the backside of data, and that we have now more than a year to actually do something with all the data we have generated. So a good position to be in, but of course, like everybody else, I hope that the market will change. We see more interest in biotech again.
But it makes you feel pretty good now. You can work and you don't have to think too much about financing for the time being, right?
It's nice to be able to focus on showing off the good data that we have generated. Yes.
Yeah. All these interesting things that you described here, once they have come even further, will there be a tablet for the patient, or will there be an injection, or is there a combination of it? The way you look upon it now, things can change, of course, but as you look upon it right now.
Yeah, so I didn't go into the details here, but the way we have done it so far is we use what we call drug in a bottle. That means that you put the powder into a bottle and you shake it up with water, and then you drink it.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for doing that early on, you can easily change the dose. You just put more powder into the bottle and you can change. But you don't spend a lot of money on developing a formulation.
Okay.
And if you need to make a tablet, let's say you have a tablet of 1 unit, and then you actually need 3 of those, then you need to make a new tablet with 3 units in.
Okay.
So we decided not to do that, to be cost efficient. So now when we have an idea of what doses are good, we actually also have developed a capsule now of pudafensine.
Okay.
And we conducted a pharmacokinetic study of that, where we showed in patients that in healthy volunteers, that it has the same behavior and the same characteristics as the oral solution has. So you can say, not only did we develop a capsule that you can use for future clinical trials or for a product later on, but we also generated extra IP around pudafensine for the future.
Okay. When listening to what you have described here and presented, there are probably many who ask the question, when do I have a possibility to make use out of this fantastic product? And it sums down to, how close are you to commercialization? I know it's ahead, but can you give us a hint? Does it take another 10 years? Does it, in best case, take another 3 years? Or what can one look upon?
Yeah, so 10 years you shouldn't take, because then you're running into issues with IP and so on.
Yeah.
I think that you can say that the next upcoming studies to do is, of course, a phase 3 to get the registration. Here you need to run 1,500 patients, a minimum in 2 studies to get that approved. You could also consider, saying that what we have shown now, actually with the data, is based on 4 dosings. A lot of the trials that have been done previously in ED patients has been dosing for 24 or 36 weeks. So again, it's very impressive. We get so good, strong data early on.
Yeah.
So you can say that for us, looking at, how long time does it take to the market, it all just depends on the partner that we are seeking.
Exactly.
How much power do they want to put into it? And also, do they want to, catch up? Do they also want the female data to catch up to the ED data? Or do they just want to go first, roll it out for ED, and then bring in FSD later?
But you mentioned an interesting word there, partner. One way or the other, you will need a partner in order to take that big jump ahead, right?
Yes.
Because you have no plans to do it all by yourself the full way.
No. You can say that what we are looking at, I showed you the numbers, 400 million men. So of course, to cover the market in ED, you need to be a big pharma player to do that, or at least a medium-sized pharma player in the US. And this is not what we are. Our mission is to go out, take in assets, bring them into the clinical trials, generate this validating proof of concept, show efficacy in patients, and then use that to create some kind of partnership or a deal or an out-licensing to a player that actually, where this fits right into the portfolio.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming here, Claus. Nice to have you here, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.